Welcome to another episode of the Great Retention. Kiley, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to jump into all things employee experience, the Iowa Clinic. So welcome today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So for our audience, right? So, we have executive leaders from different industries, and we are all looking to, to just be better leaders, right? And how we elevate our overall employee engagement, employee experience. But give our audience today, Kiley, just tell us a little more about the Iowa Clinic. What are you facing today in your role as a chief marketing officer?
Sure. So the Iowa Clinic is a physician-owned clinic. We're based in Des Moines, Iowa. We have about 1,100 employees, and 80% of our staff is clinical. So a lot of healthcare providers, and we have about 11 locations within Central Iowa. And so I started here at the Iowa Clinic about 3 years ago, right before COVID, which was a convenient starting time.
Wow.
But some of the challenges that we were facing is how do we connect people because we're relatively small. But how do we connect people across those different locations who are actively working with one another on a daily basis, but never really see each other? And so that was a
Yeah.
big challenge right off the bat. And then another challenge was we had a lot of managers who were doing their best to recognize their employees, but it was a really manual process. We had I joke, we had a little cupboard up in HR that you could go and get gift cards for, but that was all in the manager. So preferences, birthdays, anniversaries, all of that stuff, sometimes for a good number of people per manager, that's a really heavy burden. And so when I started, I thought, well, there's got to be a better way to recognize our people who are doing such a great job for our patients. And there's got to be a better way to connect people. So that's kind of where it started.
Yeah. Yeah. So 1,100 people across, you said roughly 14 locations. So people are spread out, 80% clinical, right?
Hmm.
And then you're dealing with the pandemic, with COVID, right? So not only just naturally with being spread out, people, it's hard to do recognition, but now you have, all of these other factors that you're dealing with. So I mean, absolutely understand this is a challenging environment, right? And I think it's also really interesting though, you coming in as a chief marketing officer, right? You're not in HR,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And so, but you saw this challenge, right? So talk to us a little bit more about how you kind of, from a CMO perspective, how you kind of connected these dots and said, okay, how are you going to pull these different groups in to come
Hmm.
to a strategy, come to a solutions? Talk to us a little bit about that. I think that's super helpful for our audience.
Yeah. So obviously, as a chief marketing officer, my role is not necessarily employee satisfaction, but marketing plays a big role in the culture of the clinic. And around the time that I started, shortly thereafter, we had a new CEO join the clinic, and a big initiative of his is employee experience and patient experience. And so we were really looking for ways to kind of elevate the employee experience as a part of our culture. We've always had a good culture at the Iowa Clinic, but obviously COVID presented additional challenges, and some of the challenges that I mentioned before. And so I kind of looked at it from a culture perspective. How can we create efficiencies and bring tools to the table for our managers and for our people to really allow our culture to up level a little bit? And so I took it to our HR executive and kind of said, hey, how do we do this today? Help me understand how we approach recognition and what are some of the challenges. And so I didn't just kind of jump into it as chief marketing officer and say, this is an initiative that marketing needs to lead. It was really a joint effort between HR and operations, for that matter, just to kind of say what are some of the pain points that you have out in the clinic with your people. And so what we found was we needed a way for people to connect, and there was people who would work together and talk to each other on the phone every day,
Yep.
who didn't even know them that well, and they had no way to appreciate them. And so when we vetted through all of the different recognition platforms, what we liked about Cool Leaf was that there is that social element to it. And that
Yeah.
was scary for people initially, to be like, oh, whoa, this is going to be like a social media thing for our people. But really, it's about the culture and the connection. And so Cool Leaf gave us an opportunity to allow our people to appreciate others they worked with on a daily basis, but just never saw in person. And so they could now say, "Hey, thank you for helping me get that patient in. Thank you for, going above and beyond and staying late and coming in on your shift, when you didn't have a shift." And that was the amazing part about it, is that not only did it give managers a tool to recognize their people and all of the HR stuff, but from a culture perspective, it allowed people to connect. And it was really cool as a chief marketing officer to see some of the interactions that were happening on the feed, because
Yeah.
that's something that we wouldn't have had if we didn't have a tool like that. And so just, we did an ugly sweater contest and people were posting pictures of their ugly sweaters. And it's just really cool to see like the organic culture that comes from something that started as very like, this is a recognition tool and this is how we're going to give people, appreciation and awards, to this is the way we connect with one another. And it's really cool to see that from a chief marketing officer's perspective.
I love it. What I was at a dinner with some senior leaders earlier this week, and one of the leaders was sharing that that one of the number one reasons for employee happiness is a sense of community,
Hmm.
and feeling connected, right? And being able to celebrate those small wins and appreciate, and it means a lot to people, right? And
Hmm.
creating an experience around that. So love what you're saying. And I love how this is, became an overall strategy for the Iowa Clinic. But it started with you saying, I guess, this philosophy around, if you take care of your people, they're going to take care of your patients or your customers, right?
Yeah,
And so, and
absolutely.
yeah, so it sounded like this was something you shared with your CEO from just an overall, kind of philosophy standpoint, and then you were able to connect with your HR leadership team and to kind of jointly create a partnership, right? And then ultimately, coming to a solution here. But that is amazing, right? Because I know a lot of leaders, like, they see that vision, they want to move in this direction, but how do we bring in multiple stakeholders?
Hmm.
So I love that story about taking care of your people will take care of your customers. So thank you for
Hmm.
sharing that. So as you started navigating this, Kiley, what were some of the big objectives that you really wanted to start with in terms of, priorities, focusing on? I know that you mentioned, putting a face with a name and being able to appreciate one another. What are some of the lessons learned that you've
Hmm.
experienced? Are there any, you know, challenges or any things that really surprised you? Or I'd just love to hear kind of like what your experience was as you move forward,
Hmm.
with this solution.
Yeah. So initially it was a big shift for our organization to go to something that was more holistic in nature versus departmental. And I know a lot of different companies, regardless of what industry they're in, can be pretty siloed in how they budget and how they pay for things. So that was a
Mhm.
challenge initially, just to figure out how we were going to approach this pool of giving versus how we had done it before, which was very individualized and departmental specific. And so that was a challenge, just to figure out how are we going to treat this. And it was a shift in thinking, but we got there. We still have to do a little finagling with some different departmental specific things, but
Okay.
at the end of the day, it's dramatically different than the way we approached it before. And it's this idea that when we all pay into a shared bucket, that everyone wins, because it doesn't matter whether you recognize someone in your department or you recognize someone in a totally different department. It all matters. And
Yep.
so I think that was really a challenge initially that has been overcome. And a lot of people would probably experience that it's well worth it. I think everyone would agree that being able to recognize people across departments is a benefit. Some of the other challenges that we experienced was just getting adoption. So, how are we going to, number one, launch it so that people understand what it is, how to use it? How are we going to make sure that managers use it? And then, how are we going to make sure our people stay engaged with it? I think CoolLeaf has done a great job of providing us with programming and giving us guidance on, here's some ideas that work for other people, other companies, that we use to start it. And so that's been really good. And then as we've evolved, we've created our own programming based on what we know our employees like and what works. So we've done a lot of like sharing this year. So, maybe tell us a story about your favorite veteran, or tell us a story about your mom or motherly figure for Mother's
Mhm.
Day. And so we do a lot of things like that because people enjoy that. And so it's just kind of finding out like what your employees react to and what they appreciate. Some of the, maybe water challenges maybe are good for our health and wellness side of things, but maybe we don't get as much engagement as the social. And so it's just a balance there of finding out what works and what people get engaged with. And then making sure that we're reinforcing it always. So we have quarterly all employee meetings where we pull out examples of great recognition and awards that people were given, and we highlight those. Our CEO highlights those, and a lot of people comment on those. A lot of people appreciate that because it's a way for them to get additional recognition beyond just the platform. And so we're continually reinforcing this is what excellence looks like. This is what dedication looks like by highlighting some of those really good stories. And then just
Yeah.
encouraging managers to make sure that they're using it. This is a tool you have. It's much easier than having to figure out what your employee's favorite Starbucks order is and go and get it. Well, that's great. I mean, it's great to do that too. But this is kind of, we encourage our managers to do at least 2 recognitions per month to ensure that they're making sure that their team feels appreciated. And then we also do quarterly pulse surveys, we call them. Our platform, we call it Tick Pulse, and so we administer our annual employee survey through CoolLeaf, and then we do quarterly surveys as well. And that's kind of how we keep them engaged and keep that feedback channel open. So we use it in a lot of different ways, health and
Yeah.
wellness as well, as I mentioned. But I think that reinforcing the tool and making sure it's a part of your communications plan is really crucial. So whether you're an HR leader or a marketing leader, or whatever you are in your role, making sure that Cool Leaf is an essential part of your communications plan, because without that cross promotion, people have, a ton of different systems that they have to be a part, log into and remember passwords for and all of
Right.
that stuff. And so
Yeah.
making sure that you're consistently reinforcing that as a platform has been really important from an adoption engagement standpoint.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. So one of the things, and so that you shared a lot of really great examples. One of the things, so I wanted to get pick your brain on this, because I hear this from a lot of especially HR leaders, is that conceptually they're on the same page as what you're describing. They want to build community, they want to improve communications,
Right.
appreciation, but they struggle with, how are we going to really show the ROI or show the value, of this. And so I think that it's so awesome, from a chief marketing perspective, again, you saw the connection between employee experience, patient experience, customer experience. But, and also within a healthcare setting, what are some of the things that you
Mhm.
feel have had the biggest impact? Is it being able to really focus on improving in communications? Is it, the recognition, appreciation? What do you feel like has had the biggest value or impact
Mhm.
that you've seen so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have a great chief operating officer here at the Iowa Clinic, and she has been instrumental in making sure that this gets adopted because she oversees 80% of our staff. And
Okay.
so she really pushes her leaders to make sure that they're using this tool, not only from a recognition standpoint, but from a survey standpoint, from a adoption standpoint. And she makes sure that we're cross promoting that in a lot of different ways. And so I think without leadership of all levels, making sure that they're engaging in that and supporting that. If it's just an HR initiative or it's just a marketing initiative, it's not really going to be as effective as if all leadership at all levels kind of combines to say this is something that's important. Especially in healthcare, I think, like I said before, there really wasn't a way for people to appreciate one another other than if they saw them to say, hey, thanks for that, or maybe give them a card. I mean, I think everybody in healthcare experiences the same challenges right now with staffing. Staffing is a
Yeah.
huge problem across the nation. And so they don't have a lot of time to do those kind of things, but yet it still feels good when you get to do it. And so I think Tick
Yeah.
Pulse For us, Cool Leaf has been good. We encourage people to put it on their phones, and just make sure that they're checking in. And once they get kind of amass a number of points, a fair number of points, people start talking, you know? So I think that helps
Yeah.
too. Like, where'd you get that sweatshirt? Oh, I got it on Thick Pulse. And so then they're
Right.
like, oh, and sometimes people, it takes them a while before they realize, oh, I have $100 in there and there's something I could do with that. So
Yeah.
it does start to snowball, I think, but it takes a lot of work up front, especially with healthcare providers who are so busy and they're not at their desks to like really say, okay, it's another tool, but this one's valuable to me. Um, yes, I think it's just it takes a minute to get it rolling, but at the end of the day, I think the appreciation that people feel from appreciating one another is really rewarding for them.
Yeah. No, that's great feedback, Holly. I believe, I mean, especially in healthcare, the ability to just say thank you, to appreciate someone for the
Mhm.
heroic actions that they make, each and every day. Gosh, it's so important. And so it's so awesome to hear, how you have, from a strategy perspective, have been able to enable that, and just to see the impact that it's made across the organization. So I love the story. So and I really appreciate, Kylie, you coming on the show today, just to
Yeah.
share your insights, your lessons learned, kind of everything in between. So as we wrap up, one of the things that we always like to do is, we want to give leaders practical advice, things that they can maybe just go and apply to their teams, right? And so is there anything, kind of key lesson learned, or insight that you can share as we wrap up here today?
Yeah. So, as I was thinking about this question, in healthcare, connection is so important. Innately, just the nature of healthcare, people want to help people. And so I think it can be scary knowing that there's that interaction for some leaders to say, what are they going to say? How is it going to be presented? That kind of thing. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, the connection far outweighs any risk that there may be. And we haven't had any issues whatsoever with the platform or with anything that's shared or said. You have to obviously be a little careful with PHI, not to
Yep.
include too many details. I got to say that from my compliance standpoint, but
Sure.
the connection that we see, it has far outweighed any challenges that we had to overcome initially to launch it, or any risks that were or hurdles that were brought up, and it's just really rewarding to see how people appreciate one another, even for the small things. Thanks for picking up that shift. Thanks for covering me so I could go home and see my sick kid. It's really cool to see that. And it's really cool to see it develop a life of its own, where we're not prompting people as much. They're just doing it. And that's what it's all about, is giving people an opportunity to feel like they have community and feel like they have a place with their people that they work with. And it's just really awesome to see.
That's great. Authentic team connection is so valuable. And so that's what we got to focus on. I love it. Kylie, thank you. I'm grateful for your leadership, just you as a leader for the Iowa Clinic, and just wonderful having you on the Great Retention today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Good.